I walked through the unlocked front door of my daughter Emma's house, my heart pounding with excitement after 10 years in Singapore. The reunion I'd imagined 1,000 times was seconds away, but what I saw stopped me cold. Emma was on her knees in the foyer, scrubbing marble floors with raw, reddened hands. She wore a stained gray apron with housemaid embroidered across the chest. Her unwashed hair was pulled back in a messy bun. A sharp female voice called from upstairs, demanding the bathroom be cleaned immediately. Emma flinched but didn't look up. She hadn't seen me yet. I stood frozen, my suitcase heavy in my hand, unable to comprehend what I was witnessing in my daughter's own home. The suitcase slipped from my fingers and hit the floor with a thud that echoed through the high-ceilinged entryway. Emma's head snapped up, and I watched her face cycle through emotions in rapid succession. First shock, her mouth forming a perfect circle. Then fear, her eyes widening until I could see the whites all around. Then something that looked like panic as she frantically gestured for me to leave, shaking her head and mouthing words I couldn't understand. Before either of us could speak, I heard footsteps on the staircase. A woman in her late 30s descended, wearing what I recognized as Emma's favorite blue cashmere sweater and expensive jewelry that caught the light from the chandelier above. She moved with the confidence of someone who owned everything she touched. "Who are you?" she asked, not rudely but with the casual authority of someone questioning an intruder. I opened my mouth, but Emma jumped to her feet, still clutching the dirty rag. "This is just a family friend," she stammered, her voice thin and strained. "He was passing through town and thought he'd stop by. Just a family friend." The words hit me like a physical blow. My own daughter, calling me a family friend, but the terror in her eyes told me to play along. "That's right," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Name's Zane. I knew Emma's family years back. Saw the address online and thought I'd say hello." The woman smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "How lovely. I'm Diane, the lady of the house. Emma here is our help. She's been graciously allowed to live in the basement." She said it as if she were describing an act of charity, as if providing someone shelter in their own home was a kindness. I noticed Emma's left hand then. Her wedding ring was gone, and there, on Diane's finger, was a ring that looked suspiciously like the one I'd seen in photos Emma had sent years ago. A door opened somewhere in the back of the house, and a young man entered carrying a briefcase. He was tall, good-looking in that polished way that comes from expensive haircuts and tailored suits. He barely glanced at Emma as he crossed the foyer, but he leaned over and kissed Diane on the cheek. "Kyle, darling, we have a visitor," Diane said, her hand resting possessively on his arm. "Kyle, my son-in-law." The man Emma had married with such hope in her eyes, back when I was still stateside preparing for my Singapore assignment. The man I'd met only twice before I left, who had seemed stable and successful and genuinely in love with my daughter. "Nice to meet you," Kyle said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, his smile professional. "Any friend of the family is welcome here." I shook his hand, studying his face for any sign of shame or discomfort. There was none. He looked at Diane with obvious affection, at Emma with indifference, at me with the bland pleasantness of a man greeting a stranger. "Emma, well, need dinner ready by 7, Diane said, not looking at my daughter. "Something impressive. Kyle's business associate might stop by." "Yes, Mom," Emma whispered. "Mom. My daughter called this woman Mom in her own house. I should be going," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "Just wanted to stop by and say hello. I'm looking for a hotel nearby anyway. There's a Holiday Inn about 3 miles down Route 9. Kyle offered helpfully. "Clean rooms, decent rates." As I bent to pick up my suitcase, Emma moved toward the kitchen. She had to pass close to me, and I felt something pressed into my palm. Paper. I closed my fingers around it without looking down. "It was nice seeing you," Emma said, her voice carefully neutral, but her eyes were desperate, pleading. "Nice meeting you all." I managed, and walked out the door. I'd entered with such joy just 5 minutes earlier. I made it to my rental car before I looked at the note. Emma's handwriting was shaky but legible. "Please don't tell them who you are. Meet me at Morton's Diner on 5th Street at midnight. I'll explain everything." I sat in that car for 20 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. My daughter, the little girl, I'd pushed on swings and taught to ride a bike. The young woman who'd graduated summa cum laude and had dreams of changing the world. was scrubbing floors in her own home while another woman wore her clothes in her husband's affection. I found the Holiday Inn Kyle had mentioned and checked in. But I couldn't rest. I paced the small room, watching the clock, wondering what story Emma would tell me at midnight, wondering how everything had gone so terribly wrong. Morton's Diner was the kind of place that looked like it had been serving coffee and pie since the 1950s. Red vinyl booths, black and white checkered floor, a long counter with swivel stools. At 11:45 at night, it was nearly empty except for a tired-looking waitress and a couple of truck drivers nursing coffee at the counter. I took a booth in the back corner where I could watch the door. I ordered coffee I didn't want and checked my watch every 30 seconds. At 11:58, the bell above the door chimed. Emma stood in the entrance, wearing the same stained clothes from earlier, her eyes darting around the parking lot before she stepped inside. She slid into the booth across from me, and the dam broke. Tears streamed down her face, and her whole body shook with sobs she'd clearly been holding back for hours, maybe years. I reached across the table and took her hands. They were rough, the skin cracked and dry from harsh cleaning chemicals. "I'm so sorry, Dad," she choked out. "I'm so ashamed." "Tell me everything," I said quietly. "Start from the beginning." And she did. The story came out in fragments at first, then in a steady, painful stream. After Id left for Singapore 10 years ago, Emma had met Kyle at a charity fundraiser. He was a real estate developer, successful and charming, with big plans and bigger promises. They dated for 8 months before he proposed. The wedding was small but beautiful. I'd flown back for it, stayed 3 days, then returned to my job overseas. Kyle had seemed perfect. Attentive, ambitious, talking about the future they'd build together. They bought the house 2 years into the marriage. It was everything Emma had dreamed of, a beautiful colonial with 4 bedrooms and a garden shed planned to fill with vegetables and flowers. But Kyle insisted the deed be in his name only. Tax purposes, Head said. It would be easier for his business dealings. Emma had trusted him. 5 years into the marriage, Kyle's business partner embezzled funds. Or, that's what Kyle told Emma. The company was suddenly drowning in debt. Kyle became distant, stressed, working late hours, snapping at Emma over small things. The man she'd married seemed to be disappearing under the weight of financial pressure. That's when Diane appeared. She was an investor, Kyle said. She could save the company. But she needed to see that he was serious, that he was willing to make sacrifices. The investment came with conditions. Diane would move into their home for a while. She needed to observe the business up close, Kyle explained. And Emma would need to help out around the house, since they'd had to let their housekeeper go to save money. It was supposed to be temporary, Emma said, wiping her eyes with a napkin. Just a few months, until the company stabilized. I thought I was helping save our future. But a few months became a year, and during that year, Diane's role in the house expanded while Emma's contracted. Diane started sitting at the head of the table during dinner. She began wearing Emma's clothes, claiming her luggage had been delayed, then lost, then finally just helping herself to Emma's closet, as if it were her own. Kyle made excuses, said they needed to keep Diane happy, that the investment was crucial. Then the jewelry started disappearing from Emma's jewelry box, only to reappear on Diane's wrists and neck. Kyle said Emma must be mistaken, that Diane had her own jewelry. When Emma pressed the issue, Kyle got angry for the first time in their marriage, really angry. He reminded her that the house was in his name. He reminded her about the prenuptial agreement she'd signed. He told her that if she couldn't be supportive during this difficult time, maybe she should reconsider whether she was really cut out to be his wife. The threat was clear. Emma had no job. Kyle had insisted she quit her position at the nonprofit where she'd worked after college. A wife of a successful businessman didn't need to work, Head said. She should focus on making a beautiful home. So she had. And now she had no income, no recent work experience, no savings of her own. He controlled everything, Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. The bank accounts, the credit cards, even my phone. He said it was easier to manage our finances if everything ran through him. Over the next 2 years, the situation deteriorated. Kyle and Diane became openly affectionate. They held hands, they kissed. They disappeared into the master bedroom together while Emma slept in the guest room. When Emma confronted Kyle, he threatened divorce. With the prenup, he said, she'd leave with nothing. No house, no money, no support. She'd be homeless. Emma had no family nearby. Her mother had died 12 years ago from cancer, before Emma even met Kyle. I was in Singapore, and Emma was too ashamed to tell me what was happening. She thought she could fix it somehow, or that Kyle would come to his senses, or that Diane would eventually leave. Instead, things got worse. 3 years into Diane's temporary stay, Kyle moved Emma out of the guest room and into the basement. He gave her an old flip phone with limited minutes. He monitored her emails. He told the neighbors that Emma was their live-in help, hired because Diane needed assistance managing the large house. 6 months ago, Kyle made it official. He gave Emma the apron with housemaid embroidered on it and a list of daily chores: scrubbing floors, cleaning bathrooms, cooking meals, doing laundry. Emma had become a servant in her own home. "Why didn't you just leave?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "And go where, Dad?" I had no money, no job, nowhere to go. I thought about running, but I was so tired all the time, and I just kept thinking maybe tomorrow would be different. Maybe Kyle would remember he loved me. Maybe Diane would leave. I kept waiting for things to change. "I've been sending you money," I said. "Every month for 10 years. $2,000 a month to help you out, to make sure you had security." Emma's face went white. "What? To your old bank account, the one you opened in college? You never mentioned it, so I thought maybe you were saving it or didn't need it." "Dad, I never saw any of it. Not $1. That account was closed years ago when Kyle consolidated everything under his name." The realization hit us both at the same moment. Kyle had been intercepting the money. $2,000 a month for 10 years. $24,000 a year. $240,000 total. Money that could have helped Emma escape, start over, build a new life. Money Kyle had stolen. Emma put her head in her hands. "I can't believe this is my life." I reached across the table and lifted her chin gently so she had to look at me. "This is not your life anymore. I'm here now, and I'm going to fix this. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face again. "Go back to the house. Keep playing your role. Don't let them know anything has changed. And trust me, I have a plan forming, but it's going to take a few days. Can you hold on a little longer?" "I've held on for 3 years," Emma said with a bitter laugh. "I guess I can manage a few more days." We stayed in that diner until almost 2 in the morning, and for the first time in years, Emma talked about things other than her suffering. She talked about her dreams, her hopes, the person she used to be, and I promised myself that I would help her become that person again. The next morning, I made a call to Frank Sullivan, a private investigator I'd worked with years ago on a corporate case in Singapore. Frank had retired and moved back to the States, opening a small detective agency in Boston. When I explained the situation, he was on a flight to my location that afternoon. We met in my hotel room, and I laid out everything Emma had told me. Frank listened, taking notes in a worn leather notebook, his expression growing darker as the story unfolded. "This Kyle character sounds like a real piece of work," Frank said when I finished. "And this Diane woman, you said she just appeared out of nowhere." Emma said she was an investor, came to save Kyle's business. I'll dig into both of them. Financial records, business dealings, criminal history if there is any. And I'll trace those money transfers, get proof that Kyle was intercepting your deposits. That's theft, plain and simple. How long will it take? Give me a week. Maybe less if I catch some breaks." While Frank started his investigation, I decided to do some reconnaissance of my own. I returned to the house the next day, this time posing as a traveling salesman interested in the neighborhood. I'd bought a cheap suit at a thrift store and carried a clipboard, playing the part of someone conducting a survey for a real estate company. Diane answered the door, and her eyes lit up when I mentioned real estate values. She invited me in immediately, eager to show off what she clearly considered her domain. "It's a beautiful home," I said, following her through the foyer where I'd found Emma scrubbing floors just 2 days earlier. "How long have you lived here?" "Oh, several years now," Diane said, waving her hand vaguely. "My partner and I absolutely love it. We're actually thinking of upgrading to something even larger soon." I noticed the family photos that had once lined the hallway were gone, replaced with pictures of Kyle and Diane at various locations: the beach, a fancy restaurant, what looked like a ski resort. Emma didn't appear in any of them. In the living room, I pulled out my phone and pretended to take notes while actually activating the recording function. Diane was more than happy to talk, bragging about the house, the neighborhood, the help they employed. "It's so hard to find good help these days," she said with a sigh. But we've been fortunate. Our girl is very dedicated. Lives right here in the basement. Always available when we need her. She's quite grateful for the roof over her head, you understand. Without us, well, I don't know where she'd be. That's quite generous of you, I said, bile rising in my throat. Kyle arrived home while I was still there, and I got to observe them together without the pretense of being a family friend. Kyle kissed Diane, asked about her day, mentioned something about their upcoming trip to the Bahamas. They discussed it casually, mentioning they'd be using liquidated assets to pay for an extended vacation. Liquidated assets. I wondered how much of my money they'd be spending on tropical beaches and umbrella drinks. Over the next week, I returned to the house 3 more times, each time with a different cover story. Once as a potential buyer, during which I learned Kyle was actively looking to sell the property. Once as a contractor giving estimates for renovations, which allowed me to photograph documents I found in Kyle's home office, including mortgage papers showing he'd remortgaged the house twice, and once as an insurance assessor, which gave me access to financial records that proved Diane didn't actually own anything, that she'd been living entirely off money that should have gone to Emma. Frank worked his magic on the investigation. By day 5, he had a thick folder of evidence. Kyle had indeed been depositing my transfers into a personal account, separate from any joint accounts with Emma. The bank statement showed purchases that made my blood boil: jewelry, designer clothes, expensive dinners, luxury hotel stays, all paid for with money I'd sent to help my daughter. But Frank's investigation revealed something even more significant. The prenuptial agreement Emma had signed wasn't properly notarized. It had been witnessed by Kyle's business partner and his secretary, both of whom had a vested interest in protecting Kyle. Any competent lawyer would tear it apart in court. More importantly, the house deed, while initially put solely in Kyle's name, should legally be half Emma's, due to marriage property laws in their state. Kyle might have the deed, but Emma had rights he couldn't simply erase. The most shocking discovery came on day 6. Frank found Diane's criminal history. Her real name was Diane Carpenter, and she had outstanding warrants in Florida for fraud and identity theft. She'd scammed 3 wealthy men in the Tampa area, using variations of the same scheme, moving into their homes, isolating them from family, and draining their assets before disappearing. She's a con artist, Frank said, spreading the documents across my hotel bed. A professional. And your son-in-law either doesn't know it or doesn't care because she's helping him steal from your daughter. Can we use this? Absolutely. We've got her dead to rights, and Kyle's theft of your transfers, combined with the financial abuse of Emma, the invalid prenup, and the property rights issue. We've got a strong case. You need a good lawyer. I already had someone in mind. Sarah Brennan had a reputation as the fiercest family law attorney in 3 counties. I'd heard about her from a colleague in Singapore whose sister had gone through a nasty divorce. Sarah had destroyed the ex-husband in court, leaving him with nothing but child support payments and regrets. Her office was in downtown, occupying the top floor of a renovated building that had once been a textile mill. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the river, and everything about the space spoke of success and power. Sarah herself was in her mid-50s, with steel-gray hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that seemed to catalog and analyze everything they saw. She listened to my story without interruption, occasionally making notes on a legal pad, her expression never changing. When I finished, she leaned back in her leather chair and steepled her fingers. Mr. Harper, you've brought me one of the most clear-cut cases of financial abuse and coercive control I've seen in my 28 years practicing law. This man has systematically isolated, exploited, and stolen from your daughter. The prenuptial agreement is worthless. The house is legally half hers. The intercepted funds constitute theft on a massive scale. And this Diane character, if half of what your investigator found is true, is a criminal who should be behind bars. Can we win? Win? Mr. Harper, we're going to destroy them. But I need to know something first. How far are you willing to go? As far as it takes. Sarah smiled for the first time, and it was the smile of a predator who'd just spotted prey. Good. Then here's what we're going to do. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. We would expose everything at once, publicly, with witnesses present. We would give Kyle and Diane no time to cover their tracks or craft a defense. We would hit them with the full weight of the evidence before they even knew what was happening. The first step was for me to reveal my true identity. No more pretending to be a family friend or a salesman. I would call Kyle directly, introduce myself as Emma's father, and invite myself to dinner. I made the call that afternoon from my hotel room, with Sarah and Frank listening on speakerphone. "Kyle, this is Zane Harper, Emma's father." There was a long pause. "Mr. Harper, I wasn't aware you were in town. I arrived a few days ago. I've been meaning to reach out, but I wanted to get settled first. I was hoping I could come by for dinner this Saturday, meet you properly, see how Emma's doing." Another pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, trying to figure out what angle I was playing. "Of course. We'd be delighted to have you." "Wonderful. I'll bring a business associate of mine. She's a real estate investor, might be interested in properties in the area. I hope that's not a problem." "Not at all. The more the merrier." "Excellent. Shall we say 7 o'clock? 7 is perfect. We'll have Emma prepare something special." I ended the call and looked at Sarah. He sounded nervous. "He should be," she said. Saturday arrived with unseasonably warm weather, the kind of October day that felt like summer's last hurrah. I picked up Sarah at 6:30, and we drove to the house that should have been my daughter's sanctuary but had become her prison. Emma answered the door. She was wearing a clean but worn dress, her hair pulled back, her hands still rough and red despite the lotion I'd bought her during one of our secret meetings at the diner. She looked at me, then at Sarah, and I saw hope flicker in her eyes for the first time in years. "Please come in," she said formally. "They're waiting in the dining room." Kyle and Diane were indeed waiting, dressed as if for an important business meeting. The dining table was set with fine china and crystal glasses. Candles flickered in silver holders. Emma had been ordered to create an impressive meal, and she had, though I knew it meant she'd been cooking all day. "Mr. Harper," Kyle said, standing to shake my hand. "It's good to see you again. And this must be your associate, Sarah Brennan," Sarah said, shaking his hand with a grip that made Kyle wince slightly. "Pleasure to meet you." Diane was all smiles and charm, asking about my years in Singapore, commenting on how successful I must have been to afford such a long overseas assignment. She sat at the head of the table, in what should have been Emma's seat, and played the role of hostess with practiced ease. Emma served the meal in silence: roasted chicken with herbs, garlic mashed potatoes, fresh green beans, homemade rolls. The food was delicious, which made the situation even more perverse. My daughter had slaved over this meal for people who treated her like furniture. We made small talk through the first course. Sarah played her role perfectly, asking about the neighborhood, property values, investment opportunities. Kyle relaxed visibly, clearly believing this was just a social call with potential business benefits. Then, as Emma served dessert, a homemade apple pie with ice cream, I decided it was time. "Kyle, I'm curious about something. I've been sending money to Emma for the past 10 years. $2,000 a month to her old college account. Did she ever mention it?" Kyle's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. I'm not sure what you mean. It's simple. I've been depositing money regularly, $240,000 total, but Emma tells me she never received any of it. Do you know what happened to those funds?" Diane had gone very still. Kyle set down his fork carefully. "I think there must be some misunderstanding. I don't have any knowledge of these transfers." I pulled out the bank statements Frank had compiled and placed them on the table. These documents tell a different story. They show deposits made to an account in Emma's name, followed by immediate transfers to a personal account under your sole control. They show that money being used for luxury purchases, travel, gifts, none of which benefited Emma. "I think you should leave," Kyle said, his voice tight. "Not yet. Sarah, would you care to share what else we've discovered?" Sarah opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "Mr. Morrison, I'm a family law attorney. Over the past week, my team has conducted a thorough review of your financial arrangements with Emma. What we've found is quite disturbing. The prenuptial agreement you keep threatening Emma with is invalid. It wasn't properly notarized, and it fails to meet several legal requirements for enforceability." Kyle's face had gone pale. "Furthermore," Sarah continued, "this house, while deeded in your name, is legally marital property. Under state law, Emma has a 50% ownership claim. The fact that you've remortgaged the property twice without her knowledge or consent is actually a form of fraud." "And Miss Carpenter," I said, turning to Diane, "or should I call you by your real name? We have some questions about your time in Florida." Diane stood up abruptly. "I don't know what you're talking about. Tampa, Florida. 3 counts of fraud. 2 counts of identity theft. There are active warrants for your arrest. This is ridiculous. I don't have to listen to this. Actually, you do, Sarah said calmly. Because as of 9 o'clock this morning, we filed a lawsuit on Emma's behalf. We're suing for return of the intercepted funds, dissolution of the marriage with Emma, retaining full ownership of this house, and punitive damages for emotional distress and financial abuse. We've also notified the authorities about Miss Carpenter's outstanding warrants. Kyle exploded. Get out of my house. Both of you. This is insane. But then Emma spoke. She'd been standing in the doorway to the kitchen, listening to everything. Now she walked into the dining room, pulled off the housemaid apron, and dropped it on the floor. It's not your house, Kyle, she said quietly. It's our house, and I want both of you out. Now, her voice was soft, but there was steel underneath. This was my daughter finding her strength, claiming her power, refusing to be a victim for one more second. Kyle and Diane looked at each other, then back at us. Diane grabbed her purse from the side table. This is not over, she hissed. Actually, Sarah said, it very much is. Emma, you might want to call the police. I believe Miss Carpenter is about to flee, and there are warrants that need to be served. The next hour was chaos. Diane tried to leave, but Frank, who'd been waiting outside, blocked her car. The police arrived and arrested her on the outstanding Florida warrants. Kyle screamed threats, called his own lawyer, insisted this was all a terrible mistake. But Sarah had done her homework, and the evidence was overwhelming. By midnight, Diane was in custody. Kyle had been served with divorce papers and a restraining order, and Emma was sitting on the couch in her living room. Crying tears of relief and disbelief. Kyle didn't go quietly. Within 48 hours, Head hired Bradford & Associates, one of the most expensive law firms in the state. They filed a countersuit claiming Emma had been a willing participant in the domestic arrangement, that the housemaid situation had been a consensual lifestyle choice, a kind of role play both parties enjoyed. It was disgusting. But it was also strategic. They produced text messages that appeared to show Emma agreeing to the arrangement, offering to help around the house, saying she enjoyed cooking and cleaning. The messages were on Emma's old phone, the one Kyle had controlled. Sarah warned us, the case might take months. Kyle had resources, and his lawyers were skilled at delays and complications. But she also told us something important. Truth has a way of coming out, especially when you dig deep enough. Frank dug deeper. He started investigating Kyle's so-called business partner, the one who had supposedly embezzled funds and triggered the whole financial crisis that brought Diane into their lives. What Frank discovered changed everything. The business partner didn't exist. Oh, there had been a partner once, but Head left the company years before the supposed embezzlement, moved to Oregon, started a new life. Frank tracked him down and interviewed him. The man was shocked to hear his name associated with any kind of fraud. He showed Frank documentation proving Head sold his share of the business legitimately and left on good terms. Kyle had faked the entire embezzlement story. Head bankrupted his own company deliberately, creating a crisis he could use to justify bringing Diane into the house and taking control of Emma's life. It had been a plan, a conspiracy, designed from the beginning to isolate Emma and steal everything she had. This revelation transformed the case from a nasty divorce into something criminal. Sarah filed amended charges, adding conspiracy and emotional abuse to the list. She also reached out to prosecutors about potential criminal charges for fraud. Meanwhile, Emma was learning to live again. She'd moved into my hotel room temporarily, sharing the space until we could figure out permanent living arrangements. Every morning, I watched her wake up without fear, for the first time in years. We went shopping together, and I bought her new clothes, things she picked out herself, things that made her feel like a person rather than a servant. I opened a new bank account in her name only, deposited $10,000 to get her started. We went to the Department of Motor Vehicles and got her driver's license renewed. It had expired 2 years earlier when Kyle stopped letting her drive. Small acts of reclaiming her independence, each one a victory. One afternoon, sitting in a coffee shop, Emma mentioned her old college roommate, Jennifer. They'd been best friends, practically sisters. But Emma hadn't spoken to her in 5 years. Why not? I asked. Kyle said she was a bad influence. He said she didn't respect our marriage, that she was always trying to cause problems. After a while, it was just easier not to talk to her. Have you thought about reaching out? Emma looked down at her coffee. I'm too ashamed. What do I even say? Sorry, I disappeared for 5 years because my husband isolated me and turned me into a servant. You might be surprised by her response. That evening, Emma sent a simple email. Jennifer, it's Emma. I know it's been a long time. If you're willing, I'd love to talk. The response came within an hour. Emma? Oh my God. Yes. When? And where? They met the next day at a park downtown. I stayed back, giving them privacy. But I watched from a distance as they hugged. As Emma broke down crying. As Jennifer held her and let her talk. Later, Emma told me Jennifer had tried to visit dozens of times over the years, but Kyle always turned her away with excuses. Emma was sick. Emma was traveling. Emma was busy. Jennifer had finally stopped trying after Kyle sent her a nasty email claiming Emma didn't want to see her anymore. He stole my friends, Emma said. He stole my life. But now, we were stealing it back. Jennifer became a crucial witness. She testified about Kyle's controlling behavior, about how Head isolated Emma, about the emails and phone calls where Head explicitly told her to stop contacting his wife. She provided documentation, saved messages that showed a pattern of manipulation and control. More people came forward. The neighbors who lived 3 doors down testified they'd often seen Emma working outside in old clothes, cleaning gutters, pulling weeds, while Kyle and Diane sat on the porch drinking wine. A delivery driver who regularly brought packages to the house testified Head noticed Emma's exhausted appearance, the way she flinched when Kyle or Diane raised their voices. A former housekeeper who'd worked for them briefly 2 years earlier quit after 1 week because she couldn't stand watching Emma's mistreatment. I asked her why she let them treat her that way. The former housekeeper testified in a deposition. She just looked at me with the saddest eyes and said she had nowhere else to go. The case was building momentum. Kyle's lawyers tried to suppress evidence, tried to discredit witnesses, tried every legal maneuver in the book. But Sarah was better, and the truth was on our side. Then Diane made a critical mistake. Despite being ordered to stay in state due to her pending charges, she attempted to flee. Frank had been monitoring her movements, just in case, and he tipped off the authorities when she booked a one-way flight to Mexico. Police stopped her at the airport. She was arrested, and her bail was revoked. Now she was sitting in county jail, awaiting trial on the Florida charges plus new charges related to her involvement in Kyle's conspiracy. Kyle, suddenly alone and facing the full weight of the legal system, tried one desperate move. He attempted to destroy financial records by starting a fire in his home office, claiming later it was an electrical malfunction. But the fire department's investigation revealed the fire had been set deliberately, and security footage from a neighbor's doorbell camera showed Kyle entering the office with a lighter and newspaper just minutes before the smoke alarms went off. Destruction of evidence. Another charge, another nail in the coffin of Kyle's defense. Sarah looked at me across her desk and smiled. They're falling apart. The trial is in 3 weeks, and unless Kyle wants to face criminal charges on top of everything else, I think we're going to see a settlement offer very soon. She was right. 2 days later, Kyle's lawyers requested a meeting. The hearing took place on a cold November morning. The courthouse was an imposing brick building downtown, built in the 19th century and meticulously maintained. The courtroom itself had high ceilings, dark wood paneling, and an air of solemnity that made everyone speak in hushed tones. Emma sat between Sarah and me at the plaintiff's table. She wore a navy blue suit we'd bought together, her hair styled, her hands steady despite the nerves I knew she was feeling. She looked like herself again, or maybe like a new version of herself. Someone who'd survived hell and come out stronger. Kyle sat across the aisle with his lawyer, Bradford himself, a silver-haired man in his 60s who probably charged $500 an hour. Kyle looked terrible. Head lost weight, his suit hung loose on his frame, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Good, I thought viciously. Let him suffer even a fraction of what he put Emma through. Judge Patricia Holloway presided, a stern-looking woman in her 50s, with a reputation for no-nonsense rulings and zero tolerance for deception. She reviewed the evidence Sarah had submitted, the thick folders of documents, statements, financial records, testimony transcripts. The hearing was technically a settlement conference, a last attempt to resolve things before a full trial. But everyone in the room knew what was really happening. This was Kyle's last chance to accept responsibility and minimize the damage, or face criminal prosecution. Judge Holloway looked up from the documents. Mr. Morrison, I've reviewed the evidence presented by the plaintiff. I'm going to be frank with you. If this goes to trial, you will lose. The question is how much you will lose. Your attorney has indicated you're willing to negotiate a settlement. Is that correct? Bradford stood. Yes, Your Honor. My client acknowledges that mistakes were made in the marriage, has prepared to offer a fair division of assets and reasonable support. Mistakes, Sarah said, standing. Your Honor, with respect, this case involves far more than mistakes. This involves systematic financial abuse, theft of funds, emotional manipulation, and conspiracy. My client was reduced to a servant in her own home while her husband conducted an affair and stole money sent by her father. This is not a matter of marital discord. This is a matter of criminal conduct. Judge Holloway nodded. I tend to agree, Miss Brennan. Mr. Bradford, let's hear your settlement offer. Bradford presented it. Kyle would agree to the divorce, give Emma 40% of the house value, and pay $50,000 in restitution for the intercepted funds. He would accept a restraining order but face no criminal charges. Sarah didn't even wait for the judge to respond. Absolutely not. Your Honor, my client is entitled to 100% of the house. The property is legally marital property, and Mr. Morrison has demonstrated he cannot be trusted with ownership. Furthermore, the intercepted funds totaled $240,000, plus interest, and that doesn't include punitive damages for emotional distress. The prenuptial agreement, Bradford began, is invalid. Judge Holloway interrupted. I've reviewed it. It wasn't properly executed. Continue, Miss Brennan. Thank you, Your Honor. We're seeking full ownership of the house for Emma, return of all intercepted funds plus interest, $300,000 in punitive damages, and immediate removal of Mr. Morrison from the property. We're also requesting the matter be referred to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. Kyle leaned over and whispered urgently to Bradford. The lawyer looked uncomfortable. Your Honor, Bradford said, my client cannot afford those terms. The house has been remortgaged. He doesn't have that kind of liquid capital. Then he'll have to find it, Sarah said coldly. He found money for trips to the Bahamas. He found money for expensive jewelry for his mistress. Hell, find money to compensate the woman he abused. Judge Holloway called a recess. We waited in a small conference room while Kyle and his lawyer deliberated. Emma was quiet, staring at her hands. Are you okay? I asked. I'm terrified this won't work, she admitted. That somehow he'll get away with it. He won't, Sarah said firmly. The evidence is overwhelming. Even if he doesn't settle, we'll win at trial. After 45 minutes, we were called back. Kyle looked even worse, his face ashen. Bradford stood slowly. Your Honor, my client accepts the terms with minor modifications. He agrees to surrender full ownership of the house to Emma. He agrees to repay the intercepted funds in the amount of $240,000, plus interest, for a total of approximately $300,000. He agrees to vacate the property within 30 days and to abide by a restraining order prohibiting contact with Emma. In exchange, he requests that criminal prosecution be left to the discretion of the district attorney rather than actively pursued by the plaintiff. I put my arm around her, and Sarah squeezed her hand. Outside the courthouse, a small group of reporters had gathered. The case had attracted local media attention because of its unusual nature and because Diane's arrest had been public. Emma hadn't planned to speak to them, but Sarah encouraged her. Your story could help other people, Sarah said gently, but it's your choice. Emma took a deep breath and approached the microphones. My name is Emma Morrison, she said, her voice steady. For 3 years, I lived as a servant in my own home. I was isolated, controlled, and made to believe I had no options and no value. I want other people who feel trapped in abusive situations to know that you're not alone. It's never too late to ask for help. It took my father coming home and fighting for me to find my way out, but help exists. You deserve dignity. You deserve respect. And you deserve freedom. Please, if you're in a situation like I was, reach out. Call a domestic violence hotline. Tell someone you trust. Don't wait as long as I did. The statement was short, but it was powerful. The local news ran it that evening, and by the next morning, Emma's email was flooded with messages. Dozens of people, mostly women but some men too, thanking her for speaking up, sharing their own stories, asking for advice. Emma sat in the living room of her reclaimed house, now empty of Kyle and Diane's belongings, reading through the messages with tears streaming down her face. I had no idea so many people were going through this, she said. You gave them hope. I told her. You showed them escape is possible. That night, Kyle was seen loading boxes into a moving truck, heading to some cheap apartment across town where he'd start his new life of financial obligation and consequence. Diane remained in county jail, awaiting trial on multiple charges. And Emma slept in her own master bedroom, in her own house, free for the first time in years. 3 months later, winter had settled in properly. But Emma's house felt warmer than ever. She'd spent weeks transforming it, erasing the presence of Kyle and Diane from every corner. The walls were painted in soft, welcoming colors she'd chosen herself. New furniture replaced pieces that held bad memories. The basement, her former prison, had been converted into a home office with a desk by the window, bookshelves lining the walls, and plants bringing life to the space. Emma had enrolled in online courses to finish her bachelor's degree, interrupted years ago when Kyle convinced her education didn't matter for a wife. She'd chosen social work, wanting to help others who'd experienced what she had. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, she attended classes virtually, taking notes and participating in discussions with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen since she was a teenager. But the biggest change was Emma herself. She moved differently now, walked with her shoulders back instead of hunched in submission. She made eye contact when speaking. She laughed freely, without looking over her shoulder to see if anyone would disapprove. She was reclaiming not just her house but her entire identity. She'd reconnected with Jennifer fully, and they had coffee every Sunday morning at a cafe downtown, talking for hours about everything and nothing. Other old friends had reached out after seeing the news coverage, apologizing for losing touch, offering support. Emma's social calendar, empty for years, was suddenly full of lunch dates, movie nights, and simple human connection. I'd made my own changes. After 35 years of putting career first, I retired from my position in Singapore. The consulting work had been lucrative and interesting, but it had cost me time with Emma when she needed me most. I'd rented a small apartment 15 minutes from her house, close enough to visit regularly but far enough to give her independence. We had dinner together every Wednesday, alternating who cooked. Sometimes we talked about the past, processing what had happened, working through the pain and anger and complicated emotions. Other times we talked about the future, about her school plans, about trips we wanted to take together, about rebuilding the relationship we'd lost when I moved overseas. One Wednesday evening in late January, we sat on her front porch despite the cold, wrapped in blankets, drinking hot chocolate. She'd added a porch swing, and it creaked gently as we rocked. "I got a letter from Kyle," Emma said suddenly. I tensed. "When?" "Last week. It came to Sarah's office. The restraining order doesn't prevent written communication sent through attorneys, apparently." "What did it say?" He tried to apologize. Said he lost himself, that the financial pressure made him make terrible choices, that he never meant for things to go so far. She paused. "I read it once and put it in a drawer. I don't know if he'll ever read it again." "You don't owe him anything," I said. "Not even the courtesy of reading his excuses." "I know. And that's the thing I'm still learning. I don't owe anyone anything just because they demand it. Not my attention, not my forgiveness, not my time. I get to choose what I give and to whom." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching cars pass on the street, seeing neighbors walk dogs and children ride bikes despite the cold. "Dad," Emma said quietly, "thank you for coming home. Thank you for fighting for me when I couldn't fight for myself." "I should have been here all along," I said. The guilt had been carrying for months rising up. I was so focused on building a career, on making money, on what I thought was securing our future. But I missed what really mattered. I missed you needing me. I'm so sorry it took me 10 years to come back. Emma reached over and took my hand. "You came back when it counted. That's what matters. And you taught me something important. You taught me that it's never too late to stand up, to fight back, to demand justice, even when things seem impossible. Even when you feel powerless. There's always a way forward if you're willing to take it." "I've learned something too," I said. "I spent 3 decades believing success meant money and achievement. But real success is showing up for the people you love. It's about being present, being available, being willing to fight when fight is needed. No job, no salary, no accolade is worth missing your child's life." Emma squeezed my hand. "We both learned hard lessons. But maybe that's the point. Maybe we needed to go through this to understand what really matters." The next week, Emma started volunteering at a women's shelter downtown. She led a support group for domestic abuse survivors. sharing her story, offering hope, helping others see their situations clearly. The director of the shelter told me Emma was one of the best volunteers they'd ever had because she understood from the inside what these women were experiencing. Kyle continued making his monthly restitution payments, though Sarah had to threaten legal action twice when payments were late. Head lost his business completely, was working a regular job at a property management company, living in a one-bedroom apartment and facing years of financial obligation. Diane had pleaded guilty to the Florida charges and was serving a 3-year sentence, with additional charges pending in our state once she completed that time. Justice, imperfect but real, had been served. One evening in early February, Emma and I were back on her porch swing. The weather had warmed slightly, hinting at spring to come. Emma had started planting bulbs in the front garden, daffodils and tulips that would bloom in a few months. "I got a job offer," she said. "Really? Doing what?" "The women's shelter wants to hire me as a full-time advocate. It's not much money, but it comes with benefits and a real position. I'd be working with survivors, helping them navigate legal systems, connecting them with resources." "Are you going to take it?" "I think so. It feels right. Like I can take everything terrible that happened and use it to help other people. Turn the pain into purpose." I looked at my daughter, at the woman shed become through suffering and survival, and ultimately triumph, and I felt an overwhelming sense of pride mixed with lingering guilt and deep, abiding love. "Your mother would be so proud of you," I said. "I wish she could see the person you've become." "I think she can," Emma said softly. "And I think she's glad you came home when you did." As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I reflected on everything we'd been through. The shock of that first day, finding Emma on her knees scrubbing floors, the heartbreak of learning how Shed suffered, the anger that fueled our fight back, the satisfaction of watching Kyle and Diane face consequences, and now, the peace of seeing Emma rebuild her life into something beautiful and meaningful. "I've been thinking," I said, "about what I want people to take away from our story, because it's not just about what happened to you. It's about what it says about all of us, about our choices and priorities." "What do you think the lesson is?" Emma asked. "I think there are several. First, that asking for help isn't weakness. It's wisdom. You were trapped partly because you were too ashamed to reach out, and I understand that. But if more people knew that reaching out was an option, that it didn't mean failure, maybe fewer people would suffer in silence." Emma nodded. "I tell the women at the shelter that all the time. Pride can be a prison." "Second," I continued, "your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. Kyle made you believe you were worthless, that you deserved to be treated as less than human. But that was never true. You had value all along. He just convinced you otherwise." "It took a long time to believe that again," Emma admitted. "Some days I still struggle with it, but I'm getting there." Third, and this is maybe the most important one, it's never too late. Never too late to fight back, to demand better, to reclaim your life. You spent 3 years in that situation, and I know there were times you thought you'd never escape, but you did. You found a way, with help, and now you're free. "And your lesson?" Emma asked. "What did you learn?" I thought about it carefully. "I learned that success isn't measured in paychecks or achievements. It's measured in relationships, in being present for the people you love, in showing up when you're needed." I spent 35 years chasing career goals, thinking I was building something important. And maybe I was, in one sense, but I also missed your wedding, your early years of marriage, the warning signs that something was wrong. I chose work over you, and that was the wrong choice. "You couldn't have known," Emma said. "Maybe not, but I should have made more effort to be available, to check in regularly, to maintain our connection despite the distance. I let my career become more important than my family, and that's a mistake I'll regret for the rest of my life. But you're here now," Emma said firmly. "You came home. You fought for me. You helped me reclaim everything I'd lost. That counts for something." "It counts for everything," I agreed. "And that's the final lesson. When you realize you've made a mistake, when you see someone you love suffering, you act. You don't make excuses. You don't wait for a convenient time. You don't put it off. You act immediately and decisively. Because the people we love deserve our best effort, our full attention, our unwavering support." We sat together as darkness fell, the porch light casting a warm glow, the swing creaking rhythmically. Inside the house, the lights were on, making it look cozy and inviting. This house, which had been Emma's prison, was now truly her home. And I was grateful beyond words that had been able to help her reclaim it. "I'm proud of you," I told Emma. "Not just for surviving, but for how you're choosing to live now. You could have let this experience make you bitter, closed off, afraid. Instead, you're using it to help others, to grow stronger, to become more compassionate. That takes real courage." "I had a good example," Emma said, smiling at me. "My dad, who flew halfway around the world at 68 years old to fight for his daughter, who refused to give up even when things looked impossible, who showed me that love means action, not just words." As we finally went inside, out of the February cold, I looked back at the porch swing one more time. It would still be there tomorrow, and the day after, a symbol of the peace Emma had fought so hard to achieve. She deserved that peace, deserved the life she was building, deserved every good thing coming her way, and I was grateful I'd been given the chance to help her find it, even if it arrived almost too late. Before I left that night, Emma hugged me tightly. "I love you, Dad. Thank you for everything." "I love you too, sweetheart. And I'll always be here. No more 10-year absences, I promise." Driving back to my apartment, I thought about all the people out there who might be experiencing what Emma went through. The isolation, the control, the slow erosion of dignity and self-worth. I thought about the importance of staying connected to the people we love, of noticing warning signs, of being willing to intervene even when it's difficult or uncomfortable. Emma's story could have ended differently. If I hadn't decided to surprise her, if I'd called ahead and given Kyle warning, if I'd believed his excuses about Emma being busy or unavailable, she might still be scrubbing those floors, wearing that apron, living as a servant in her own home. The thought made me shudder. But it didn't end that way. It ended with Emma free, with justice served, with lessons learned, and growth achieved. It ended with hope. And if sharing this story helps even one person recognize their own situation, if it inspires even one person to reach out for help or to fight back against abuse, then everything we went through will have served a greater purpose. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt trapped in a situation where you couldn't see a way out? How did you find the strength to ask for help or make a change? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if this story moved you or made you think differently about the importance of staying connected to loved ones, please hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories that matter, and share this video with anyone who might need to hear it. Together, we can create a community where people feel empowered to stand up for themselves and for those they love. Thank you for listening to Emma's story, to our story. I hope it reminds you that it's never too late to fight for what's right, that family and love matter more than any career or achievement, and that asking for help is one of the bravest things you can do. Take care of yourselves, stay connected to the people who matter, and remember that you always have more power than you think, even in your darkest moments. Until next time, be kind to yourself and to others.